it's not as starkly distinctive from its Jewish matrix as it is from the larger sort of pagan environment. For example, obviously Judaism, classical Roman era Judaism, Jews were supposed to take a stance of likewise withdrawing from the worship of the gods. And that was objectionable in pagan eyes as much as the later Christian withdrawal from worshiping the gods. And the charge of impiety and even atheism was hurled against Jews at times as it came to be hurled against Christians. The difference is, however, that on balance, although pagans found the Jewish refusal to worship the gods objectionable and even antisocial and so on, they could finally sort of swallow it because it was a feature of the ethnicity of Jews. In the Roman world, religion is typically associated with your nation, your people. You get your gods with your birth certificate. And it never has to occur to you, gee, what shall I do for religion, any more than than you wonder as you're growing up, what language shall I speak? I mean, it's just what you are. And the Jewish religion, as such, was simply seen as an aspect of the Jewish ethnos, the Jewish people. So they had this objectionable stance, but it was their national stance. It was their people stance. And so in the larger kind of logic of religion and the culture in the Roman period, pagans could sort of say, well, it's weird, it's objectionable, I consider it to be hostile and antisocial, but hey, it's their national custom, so okay. Every nation has its own national peculiarities, the Jews only more so. But in the case of what came to be early Christianity, the Jesus movement, even from the 50s onward, is rapidly becoming a trans-ethnic religious movement whose origins lie in the Jewish, Second Temple Jewish tradition, but who begin progressively over the course of the first century even, begin to be distinguished demographically because they are made up of so many unconverted pagans. By unconverted pagans, I mean pagans who don't go through a proselyte conversion process. That is, circumcision, taking up the law of Moses, and effectively becoming Jews. Pagans could become a proselyte and then say, I'm withdrawing from the worship of the gods and so on. But a proselyte is someone, says Philo, for example, who leaves his family, leaves his nation, joins the Jewish nation, and effectively changes his ethnicity as well as his religion. In early Christian circles, as we use the term, pagans who became Christian adherents didn't change their nationality, didn't cease to be Athenian or Egyptian or Syrian or whatever they were, weren't expected to break their ties with their family, and yet were supposed to reorder their whole religious life around this one God. So in the eyes of the larger public, this just did not compute. As I say, the logic of ethnicity made allowance for Jewish monotheism, so to speak, but there was nothing in the logic that made allowance for individual pagans withdrawing from the worship of the gods and yet claiming still to be members of their society. It was a clashing thing. There introduces there a separation between ethnicity and what we would identify as religiousness. There is no separate category of religion in the Roman world, but arguably early Christianity invents it by basically saying, you remain what you are ethnically in your family or in your city, but now this is the only God you're to relate to. And they didn't use the term, but in our terms, we could say early Christianity invents the notion of a distinguishable religious identity, distinguishable from your ethnicity. So I began that chapter by pointing out in a modern society such as Britain, there are periodic censuses, and one of the questions on the census will typically be, what is your racial or your ethnic alignment? And you might say white British, black Caribbean, whatever. And then there will typically be another question that will say, what is your religious affiliation? And you can answer Hindu or Jewish or Christian or whatever, and we think it quite natural that you have to ask both questions and separately. This would not make sense in the Roman world. Nobody would think to ask you your ethnicity and your religion because the two go together. early Christianity arguably separates the two and effectively invents, you might say, what we would call the notion of a separate religious identity.